my name is Alex. Welcome back to 72nd Vipers. Today we're going to be doing something kind of different. We're going to be reviewing the FA-18 Hornet in DCS. I don't normally review a module, but this is the time I decided the F-18 is popular as ever. So before we start, let me just give you guys a little bit of a background of exactly what is the F-18 Hornet. The F-18 Hornet is a multi-role fighting aircraft. It was mostly developed in the late 80s and early 90s as a multi-role fighter. The United States desperately needs something to replace their Tomcats. It had to be naval, also had to be very good at air-to-ground / air-to-air, had to be very maneuverable, has to be not too expensive. It had to be everything. That was a pretty tough job. So McDonnell Douglas and Boeing teamed up to make the FA-18 Hornet. There was multiple versions of the FA-18 Hornet. There was the Legacy, there was the Super Hornet, and then now there's new Generation 3 Hornet. In DCS, we currently have the Legacy Hornet, which was one of the older generation planes, but nonetheless, this is pretty modern as far as DCS standards. The DCS F-18 Hornet was created by Eagle Dynamics, the developer and publisher of DCS World. They have done a phenomenal job, just for the simple answer. However, this module cost 80 buckaroos. Let that sink in, $80. That is a good chunk of change for a lot of people. Now, when there's Steam sales and sales, you can sometimes find this module going on sale for $55, 30% off. But in the purpose of today's video, we're going to be measuring it at full MSRP retail price of $80. Now, let's talk about the specifications of this aircraft. This aircraft measures at 56 feet long, has two General Electric's F404 turbofan engines producing 17,700 pounds of thrust each. It has an endurance of 1 hour and 10 minutes at 700 miles. And an endurance of 1,000 miles with the centerline tank attached. It has a maximum flight altitude of 55,000 feet, as well as a top speed of Mach 1.7, 1,190 miles per hour. Now, the Hornet, it's widely regarded in the DCS community as a pretty slow plane. Yeah, the plane's not fast. There's no doubting that. The plane is not fast compared to an F-14 or F-16. Now, I've gotten this plane up to a Mach 1.6 in DCS. That's not the 1.7 Mach speed top speed, but that's not slow. Well, 1.6. Granted, that was going in a straight line at 29,000 feet. But often when I'm dogfighting, I have a top speed, or an average speed of Mach 0.75. I would believe the main reason why people think that this plane's slow is because it has a sheer, absolutely phenomenal amount of ordnance it can carry. It can carry so many pylons, so many weapons, so much weight of weapons. When this thing's fully loaded, it handles more like an A-10, not gonna lie. But when it's empty, it handles like an F-16. It's really interesting because when it's light, it's literally an F-16. When it's heavy, it's an A-10. Okay, yeah, a little faster than an A-10, I'm sorry. But yes, it handles similarly and feels similar to an A-10 fully loaded. Now, before I really start telling my experiences about this plane, I would just like to point out one thing. I have been playing DCS for about a year now, for a total playtime of 359 hours as of today. That's not much compared to many of you people with thousands and thousands of hours. I have gotten the Hornet as my second module right after the F-15. I would like to say I have safely played at least 150 hours in this plane. So I have a generally good idea of how this plane is. Let's start talking about the things that you get when you buy the plane. So, for $80, you're kind of wondering what you get besides the plane itself. Well, the plane itself does include liveries, and includes a lot of them. And I actually kind of like all the liveries. The liveries look really good. There are a good variety of them. There's, I would say, at least 20 of them. So that's good. You can customize your plane. Second thing is, if you haven't bought a naval American aircraft, or not American, well, actually, yes, American. If you have bought an F-14, then you don't get this. But you get CVN 74 John C. Stennis. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a clip to show you what it looks like, but I can send a picture. So you get John Stennis. Then you have the optional Super Carrier DLC. But we're not going to talk about that. So John Stennis, as a normal carrier, is pretty well detailed. It has pretty good textures in it. And it's a pretty good carrier to take off with. Usually many servers, if you're wondering about multiplayer servers, they have it in good locations. And overall, good carrier. Third thing is, it kind of includes what the plane's kind of no-brainer. It includes a lot of weapons. You have anywhere from AGM-65, AIM-7MHs, Sparrows, Harpoons, Harms, Sidewinders, AMRAAMs, GBU, CBU, Lightning Targeting Pods, Hydras, Zunis, and there's a lot more stuff planning to be added with this plane. So there's a good amount of weapons for you to enjoy. Now, before I get too far, let me just say that this plane has earned its nickname Wagner-mobile, or Bogachev-mobile. Yes, I would have to say this plane is one of the most updated supported planes in this game. Literally, you cannot go without an update without updating this plane in some way. There's always something being changed about it. So if you're worried about this plane being dead after a couple of years, yeah, no. I don't know what a couple of years is, but so far these last year and a half or two of this plane being out, it has literally been updated almost every single update. This is literally Matt Wagner's favorite plane. Just saying. Right, let's go on to the flight model of this aircraft. This is probably one of the biggest masterpieces of this plane. This plane is phenomenal in its flight model. There's no bugs in it. It's really good. When it's heavy, it's very, I wouldn't say sluggish, but very tank-like. When it's empty, it's very nimble-like. It's very nimble. It's amazing. When you're pulling a lot of AOA, the plane violently shakes, and you literally feel like you're about to stall. If you're playing on a HOTAS, you don't even have to. I have a T-Flight HOTAS 1 at this moment. I don't have the best HOTAS. But I still get the feeling from my monitor, the audio, that this plane is about to stall. The throttle, when you're moving it back and forth, it makes a lot of clicking. You know where it's at. If any of you guys have flown the F-14 before, you know the throttle is very clicky. It's something similar to that, as you can hear here. The RWR, it beeps at you. And it doesn't just beep, it becomes annoying. Sometimes you have to turn it off. But hey, that's better than not beeping at all. Actually, I don't know, at some points. The thrust, it feels good. The engines feel accurate. They feel like proper engines. They don't spool up in half a second like the F-15's engines, but at the same time, they don't take 5 years to spool up like the Harrier's engines. It's really, really dynamic. And the landings in this plane are quite good. Now, if you've ever flown the F-15 before, you do know that the landing gear is literally a piece of glass. It's literally glass with some tires on it. It's literally some chopsticks. This is literally the weakest landing gear ever. But in this plane, granted it is a naval plane, it is a very strong landing gear. You will literally have to purposely kamikaze it into a runway for the landing gear to bend or break. You have to be going more than 3,000 feet per minute for the landing gear to break. It's a really, like, you will break this landing gear if you try. But if you accidentally hit the runway a little hard, there's no issue with that. It's really strong, good gear. I love it. However, the negative thing about it though on the taxiway, the brakes, not that good. Now, I'm not going to really blame this on the actual module. I'm going to more blame this on the actual real plane in real life having not the best brakes. But, hey. Now, continuing off with audio. The afterburners in this plane are... Well, the actual afterburners themselves, they're nice and they look good and they're pretty powerful. But the actual feeling of the afterburners when you turn them on is quite muffled. It doesn't roar like the Tomcat. It doesn't shake your plane like the 15. It's quite muffled. You don't really know if your afterburners are on unless you look at your throttle or that you heard the detent. There's not much vibrations. Even with the realistic setting on, you don't really know much. And that's kind of a downside because as virtual pilots, in real life, I assume you feel the crazy vibration sound and that of afterburners. Here in virtualness, unless you spent $15,000 on a motion rig, it's kind of hard to. So that's kind of very important. Now let's talk about the HUD a little bit. Arguably one of the most important features on a plane, the HUD. The HUD is different. I can't say it's bad though. It's not a bad difference. I'm going to be comparing the F-16 a lot here. I mean, the F-14 doesn't even have a HUD. I mean, it does, but it's such an old plane. A HUD is very new. This plane has one of the best HUDs I've seen. Just because it can convey so much information in such a small space. Like, such good. On the left, you have a digital speedometer. I mean, like, all speedometers are digital, but, like, the numbers aren't, like, on a ladder. That's confusing. They literally just get read out loud. Same thing with the altitude. Your Mach number, very critical, is literally displayed to you right there. Now, granted, all your HUD things have a backup gauges right below your right MFD, but hopefully you'll never be needing to use them. You have your G counter, very useful. You have your maximum Gs. Granted, I don't really know what that's used for, but hey, there you go. You have your AOA. Speaking of AOA, this thing can pull massive amounts of AOA at slow speeds. And speaking of that, let's go back to the flight model. I'm sorry, I'm a little jumping here and there, but the AOA on this thing is amazing. At low speeds, it's almost unrivaled, this plane. It's right next to the Su-27 in low speeds. This thing's really good at low speed fighting. Almost better than high speeds? I'm not sure. But it really owns it well at low speeds. Now, sorry for dodging back and in again once in a while for audio, but this plane, while taking off at full afterburners and you pulling a little bit of G, this thing sounds like an F1 car. It just sounds like an F1 car. It's crazy how crazy it sounds. You don't even believe it's a plane. At some points, it sounds more like an F1 than an actual plane. It's crazy. You would think someone just glued a V12 into your plane. Granted, many F1 cars don't have V12s. But you would literally think it sounds like an F1. It's crazy. It sounds so high-pitched. It's really cool. Right. Now moving away from the flight physics and that. This plane, let's talk a little more about armaments. Or more like sensors / armaments. Let's first touch upon the radar. The radar on this F-18 is not as good as the F-14's radar, but it makes up for it in the fact that it has a good data link. The data link on this plane is quite good. Not as good as the JF-17 or F-16s, but still enough. Radar on itself is kind of self-sufficient. It's enough to do. And that combined with the RWR, which is quite good, it's enough to do. But I wouldn't be saying you're going to be tracking any targets more than 50 to 60 miles away. maybe at the perfect altitudes, perfect ranges, perfect aspects, maybe 80, 90 miles tops. But that doesn't really matter because your AMRAAMs really can't fire more than 45 miles. One thing I've noticed with all these planes is the planes that don't really use their data link or not really reliant on it have really good radars. But the planes that have a very good data link and relies on other planes have not the best radar. Let's take the JF-17 for example. The JF-17 is actually a very good plane. I've never actually had the fortune of personally flying it, but from all the people that's telling me, it's a good plane. But, from what I hear, and from what I believe, the radar on that plane is doo-doo. That's because it has one of the best data links out there. But the radar is really poo-poo. No. But, let's draw a diagram real quick. Let's put one end of the spectrum of the F-14's radar, which is really good, and let's put the other end of the spectrum, the JF-17 radars, which is really poo-poo. Now, I don't know what's better, having a phenomenal data link or having a phenomenal radar but not a phenomenal data link and vice versa. But we're going to put the F-18 in the middle, or more toward the JF-17 side. So 0%, or let's put out notches. So 0 would be the F-14 side, and 10 would be the JF-17 side. Not meaning 10 is better and 0 is worse. It's just on the scale. The F-18 would be more like on the 8 or 7. It's lenient toward the JF-17, but it's not there yet. The radar is decent enough for you to work by yourself, and the data link's good enough. So I kind of feel that this is kind of a sweet spot. Even though I don't really understand why planes can't have both really good radars and both really good data links, but oh well. Now, this plane also features a helmet-mounted display. That's a huge benefit, because HMDs, or helmet-mounted displays, are very, very good in dogfights. Also, it's very good if you look around. You can still see all your main info. But that's not really the main reason why it's there. The main reason is for the 9X Sidewinders. And there's other reasons, but that's the main one. 9X Sidewinders are, well, really good. They're heat-seeking Fox 2 missiles, as all Sidewinders are, but their seeker head is huge in the senses of it can carry a vast area. So all you have to do is slew your head around or move your head around with the HMD on, and it's going to automatically track. The Sidewinder is going to look at where you're looking. So if you see an aircraft at your 10 o'clock high or 9 o'clock low, you literally look there and it will find it. And you'll be crazy that Sidewinder will probably pull 25 Gs or so to get itself around and going toward the target. It's really amazing in dogfights. It's literally an invaluable tool. Chances are, if you're going to fight a plane without it, you're going to be the one that's going to get the missile off first. Now, speaking of dogfighting, this radar, we're going to go back to the radar for a second. The radar on this plane is literally amazing at close air combat maneuvers. At BVR is, well, where we just talked about, it's decent, but, you know. But at close combat, it's really good. Like, really good. It literally locks something, and it literally keeps track of it unless it's like right on below you or left behind you or something. It's a really good radar. And also, more about the radar. The radar has a surge sweep of 140 degrees. That's nuts. 140 degrees. That's almost 9 to 3 o'clock. That's more like a 10 till 2. It's a really wide sweep. It's very wide. That's enough to blaze sweep everything that's going to be somewhat in front of you. Everything to your sides. That's really good. Anyway, back to the ACM radar. It's very smart, so it'll literally, if you're just flying around, it will literally lock something up like 10 miles automatically, give you a pipper, And if you're in gun mode, it will literally tell you where to shoot. Now, many planes have like the F-15 and the F-14, but this is somehow different. It's much more smooth. It's much nicer. It's much more redundant, much more reliable, much easier. It's really interesting. Now, I haven't flew the F-16 much. I do have it, but I don't fly more than like 15 hours ever. The F-14, I flew about 40, and the F-15, I flew about 15. There's a reason why I like the F-18 so much. That's because it's a boss at air-to-air. Especially close range. It does have its cons with its radar a little bit at long range, but at short range, it's almost unbeatable. Unless you're going against a Tomcat or a Viper, which is going to have a hard chance. Almost unbeatable. It's really good. And very easy. Now, let's go to air-to-ground. Air-to-ground of this plane is equally as good as air-to-air. That's the thing with the F-18. It's very jack of spades. It's good at everything. It's not going to be as good as an air-to-ground as an A-10, and it's not going to be as good as air-to-air as an F-16 or F-14. But it's good at everything. Because the F-14 is not that good at air-to-ground, and the A-10 is not that good at air-to-air. This plane is right in the smack dab middle. It's good, very good for air-to-ground, and it's very good for air-to-air. If I had to pick a plane, a single plane, it'll be this one. Because the fact that I can just do everything with this plane is really cool. You don't have to switch planes. You really just arm up with the other ordnance if you want to do air-to-ground. And there you go. And the plane is highly computerized, so it's not going to be hard, and you don't need to watch 50 hours of tutorials. Speaking of that, let's go to the learning curve. Learning curve in this plane is, how do I say it? It's easy to learn, hard to master. Still, after 150 hours, and I know that's not much to a lot of you people have flown this plane at least 600 hours. But for me, I'm still learning this plane. At least the finer features. Now that's partly to do with the fact that they constantly keep updating it. But another fact to do is, it's just a plane. It's hard to say that it's hard to learn, because the reason it's so hard to learn, it's because it's so much stuff to learn. If I take A-10 is really hard to learn too. If I take an F-14, F-14 is not that hard because it really only does one thing, air-to-air. And it really only carries a limited ordnance. Granted, it's no slouch, the F-14, and I love it. It's one of my favorite planes. But it doesn't carry as much variety and as much stuff as this. And also, another thing is this plane is mostly glass. I don't mean like it's weak. I just mean the cockpit is very digital. There's not much analog stuff in it. So you're going to have to learn to your displays a little bit. Now, some people think that's good because the F-14 is very, very, very bad in terms of how much stuff is digital. And the JF-17 is very, very digital. This flies more toward the JF-17 side because at the same time it is more of a modern fighter. So, there's the learning curve. I always say it's easy to learn, hard to master. It's easy to take off, easy to start up, easy to fly, as far as DCS modules go, which are pretty hard in general. But it's hard to master and perfectly do everything with this plane. I'm still learning how to do proper BVR air-to-air. But I would go to as far as saying that this plane, if you're looking for a full fidelity module, this plane with this learning curve is definitely going to be for you. Because if this is going to be your first or second full fidelity module, by that I mean a fully clickable everything, fully detailed, get this plane. Because it's not forcing you to learn everything. And actually just purely flying the plane and landing it is really easy. So if that's all you want to do, this plane's really good. And if you just want to practice flying in this game, which I've done for like 30 hours before actually even... I remember the very first time, I know you guys really don't care, but when I first hopped into the Su-25 and TF-51. I've literally just spent 25 hours just flying the plane, getting used to the flight physics in this game. Because they're very unique. Especially, I don't really come from any simulations. I mostly come from War Thunder, which is, as you guys know, classifies as a simulation. But anyway, so that's what I was going to say. This plane is really, really good to fly. Slash, if you do want, it's really, really good to use its weapons. And in addition to that, I know the DCS community is now kind of leaning toward aerodynamics. Yes, aerobatics. And this plane, also with this Blue Angel skin, which looks sick, is really going to be good for aerobatics. So, this plane's going to be really good for aerobat. Right. Now let's properly get into air-to-ground. Air-to-ground is really good with this plane, just like air-to-air. It has really good combinations of guided and unguided weapons. It has good bombs. It has good guided bombs, lasered. It has really good rockets, unguided. It has really good guided rockets. Speaking of guided rockets and unguided rockets, mostly the unguided rockets, you can carry. So each pod is going to have 19 2.75-inch Hydra high explosive rockets, right? 19, right? And then you could have 2 rockets, 2 pods per pylon. And there's 4 pylons able to carry that. So you can have 38 per pylon, and you have 4 pylons. That's going to be 38 times 4 rockets. That's going to be 152 rockets. Now, these Hydras are not going to penetrate a T-72 or an M1 Abrams, but if you're looking for lightly to no armored stuff, and you spam weapon release, this thing will literally almost, I wouldn't say because I know I'm going to trigger so many people, but this thing is going to come close to putting the A-10 to shame in terms of lightly armored stuff. Granted, the A-10 does have phenomenal gun. Speaking of gun, this gun in this plane is a 20mm gun. I can't keep on the top of my head what the name of the actual gun is, but it's 20mm. It is a really good gun. It has an ammo capacity of about 531 rounds, and it has a fire rate of around 1100 shots per minute. Yeah. No, maybe even more. I think it's 1500. It shoots fast. Almost as fast as the GAU 8. No, I think faster. This thing is going to literally harass lightly armored targets. It's going to harass aircraft. However, be careful because it shoots too fast. Granted, it does have a high and low fire mode. Even low, though, is like 1100 rounds per minute. Still very fast. You have to be very careful with your trigger, because if you're heavy triggered, you're going to run out of ammo like that. But if you put your shots on point, which this gun is pretty accurate, it will definitely harass a lot of things. So, if you run out of ammo, or rockets, or bombs, and you have lightly armored targets, or even mediumly armored targets if you have AP rounds, this thing will literally decimate anything. That's how good that is. And we were talking about lightly armored stuff. Who said you can't do heavily armored stuff? This thing carries AGM-65s, which if you don't know are Mavericks. They're either lasered or IR. Personally, I preferred IR guided stuff because it's just simpler. But it carries laser and IR guided Mavericks for very heavily armored targets and laser guided rockets. Yeah. Literally, you cannot escape with this plane. It's seriously crazy how great it is at air-to-ground. It's really impressive. Right. Now, let's summarize this. So, we're going to go through everything right now, and I'm going to give everything a proper rundown, summarization, and everything. So, we're going to just say that the F-18 Hornet is a multi-role aircraft, and it's going to be really good for anything in DCS. It has a fly-by-wire flight model. which is really good for new players, and it kind of does save your ass a bit, especially if you're really not that smart like me. It really does watch out for you, and it also has automatic flaps. So if you're a little hesitant on flaps and you kind of always forget to put them in, it will automatically do so. And when it's in the auto position or raised position, it will automatically drop and lower them depending on what maneuvers you're pulling. The sensors and weapons. This plane has a, I would say, average radar. Has an average data link, or maybe a little bit more than average. And it's quite good. The missiles on this thing are good. The ground armaments are good. This plane is overall, if I could say a word for this plane, it would be not average, but a little bit above average. It does everything good. It's a very good plane. It will literally do anything that you want it to. It's good at dogfighting, good at air-to-ground, good at going fast, good at going slow, good at fighting the get a module that's going to get your full money's worth, and you just want to have this as your general plane, do it. It's worth it. And if you're really hesitant, wait for a sale. But I bought this plane full price, and I'm not regretting that I'm buying it. It's a really good plane. So, if I could say one word for this plane, it would be good. Not phenomenal. Not bad. Not average. Good. That's just this plane. In terms of its actual fighting. Now, the details? Yes, the details. The details are a completely different story in terms of how DCS modeled it. The modeling on this plane is above words. It's phenomenal. There's so much wear and tear. There's so much detailing. There's so many clickable buttons. There's so much little dings and scratches in the paint on the exterior. There's so much 3D modeling required. There's so many screens. There's so much mechanics. It looks amazing. The afterburners are good. I wish they would kind of improve that. But the liveries are great. The detailing, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful plane. And in my opinion, it's one of the prettiest planes I've seen. Like, a lot of people I'm gonna literally get so much hate for this, but a lot of people will say that the F-14 is the prettiest plane ever. I don't know. I have to give this one to the Hornet. Hornet's a pretty plane. When you look at it, you say, wow, that's a fighter. The F-14, when you look at it, you say, wow, that's a big interceptor. Or that's a big fighter. The F-14 is a big plane, yeah. And speaking of size, it's hard to tell in DCS how big something is. I would say this is a little bit bigger than the F-16. And as you guys know, the F-16 is pretty small. So in this plane, there's actually a pretty small plane. It's nothing going to be like an F-15 or F-14. Or an SU-27. So that's my summary on that. This plane is really good. If you're looking for one module, or at least your first full fidelity module, I say go for the Hornet. It's very good, very easy to fly, but it's not going to be too easy to the fact that you're going to get bored. It's going to be very hard to master, which is some good for some people. It's going to definitely take a good amount of couple hours and a lot of tutorials to master some systems, like it has for me. But hopefully, and not hopefully, in the future, I'm going to be making tutorials on how to work this plane. So without further ado, thank you everyone for hearing me review this plane in my unorganized fashion. I appreciate all the support the channel has been getting recently. Thank you to all my subscribers and all your non-subscribers for watching this video. And have a phenomenal rest of your day / evening / night. Have a good one, everyone. Stay safe. Goodbye. That was so aggressive. Goodbye.